In 1996, the remains of the ship that may have belonged to the infamous pirate Blackbeard were discovered off the coast of North Carolina. Queen Anne's Revenge, believed to have been Blackbeard's flagship, is currently occupied by octopuses, moray eels, and other sea creatures. The ship rests 25 feet underwater, less than a mile and a half away from the shore. That seems to be quite close. Nothing seems to be stopping researchers from diving and exploring the ship. The study of the ship has been significantly hampered by bad weather and insufficient funding. Despite these challenges, archaeologists are increasingly confident that the described wreckage is indeed Queen Anne's Revenge. The artifacts recovered from 50% of the site are corroded beyond recognition, and it took years to clean and analyze them, but they seem to match descriptions from historical sources quite well. And if you think there's bound to be a treasure on a pirate ship that's been resting quietly at the bottom since 1718, well, no. So far, no treasure in the conventional sense has been found, just grains of gold. But archaeologists have a different idea of treasure. They found hundreds of historical objects, a diminutive signal gun, turtle bones, a pewter syringe, and even an intact piece of window glass. A huge rarity, especially when it comes to shipwrecks. In 2010, divers discovered an ornate sword hilt made of iron, copper, and animal horns. Basically the stuff you'd expect to see in a ship of this type. For a long time, scientists have been arguing whether the ship actually belonged to Blackbeard. After all, it's a pirate ship, which means we shouldn't expect to find any branded merch there. But eventually they got enough circumstantial evidence to officially recognize the find as Queen Anne's Revenge. The wreck site was even included in the U.S. National Register of Historical Places and taken under protection. Imagine how surprised Blackbeard would have been to find this. Now let's talk about something more ambiguous. The legend of giant skeletons in North America has been around for centuries. Many local tribes in the Northeast and Southwest have told of red-headed giants and how their ancestors used to fight them. The accounts, of course, are very vague. Some mention cannibalism, but say nothing about the height of their opponents. Some give different accounts, but many mention red hair. There's even information that the ancient Aztecs and Maya recorded, well, as best as they could, their encounters with a terrifying race of giants to the north. True, this evidence seems very inconclusive to me. It seems more likely that the Aztecs just considered tall people to be giants. That sounds more believable than the story of the Lompoc Rancho, but everyone's entitled to their own opinions. So in 1833, a group of Mexican soldiers stationed at Lompoc were digging a hole for a gunpowder pit on an old rancho. Suddenly, the soldiers unearthed a human skeleton. Apparently, it was at least 12 feet long. The giant had double rows of teeth on its upper and lower jaws and was surrounded by burial offerings such as carved shells, huge stone axes. I'm surprised they didn't find some ancient computer around, an invention of a highly advanced lost civilization. Fearing that the find was a terrible bad omen, the local Indians panicked. To prevent trouble, authorities reburied the giant's remains somewhere on the rancho. Also, many conspiracy buffs argue that this was not an isolated incident. Giant skeletons were found all over America during archaeological and mining operations in the 19th and early 20th centuries. What about the scientists? Well, they're hiding the truth, as usual, or they just don't want to study the unique finds because, well, I have no idea why. What I do know is that you shouldn't trust the words of people who allegedly found giants. The story of the Cardiff giant proves this well. On October 16, 1869, a group of workers were hired to dig a well near a barn in Cardiff, New York. The men didn't have to dig for long. Their shovels soon hit something that looked like a stone foot. Within minutes, the stunned workers had unearthed a man's body. And not just any man, these were the remains of a man who was at least 10 feet tall and weighed about 3,000 pounds. News of the discovery quickly spread across the state. People flocked to Cardiff to see the giant with their own eyes, and newspapers declared it a singular discovery and a new wonder. The giant's owner, George Hull, quickly covered the giant with a white tent and began charging admission for seeing it. More than 2,500 people came the first week alone, allowing Hull to make good money on tickets and eventually sell his find for more than $20,000. But where did the giant fossilized man come from in the first place? It all started in 1868, when Hull, a man deeply devoted to science, got into an argument with a priest and his supporters over Darwin's theory of evolution. As an atheist, Hull disagreed that the Earth was once inhabited by giants. However, he was in the minority party and lost the argument. Outraged by his defeat and people's credulity, Hull decided to prove how easy it was to deceive people by building a fake giant. He hired people to quarry a 10-foot-long gypsum block. He then found 2 sculptors to create the giant, which they made in secret, even using blankets to dampen the sound of the carving and not attract attention. The finished giant was transported and buried on the farm, then accidentally dug up by workers. Hull ended up spending $2,600 to create this elaborate prank, but earned on it much more. Another example is the mummy of a giant. In 1895, prospectors near San Diego, California made an incredible discovery, a huge manufactured mummy that they called the tallest human giant who ever lived. The mummy was transported around the country as a traveling exhibit and put up for sale to the Smithsonian Institution, but the institution and the gold miners failed to reach an agreement. Instead, it was sold to a private collection. At first glance, there was no reason not to buy this remarkable specimen. They wanted to sell the enormous mummy to the Smithsonian Institution for $500. However, when the experts from the institution examined the mysterious giant more closely to determine whether it's real, they discovered something incredible. The skin samples contained gelatin as one of the main components. Yep, it was literally a jelly mummy. Naturally, after this, the scientists lost all interest in the giant, and it ended up in the hands of a private collector. He joined a traveling circus and toured for a while before leaving for the gold mines of Alaska. He left behind the entire collection, including the mummy. Overall, you can see why any accounts of the mysterious giants allegedly encountered by the Aztecs and Mayans seem questionable, to say the least. Unlike the actual archaeological finds, a rock crystal dagger found in Spain has been called one of the most remarkable and technically sophisticated artifacts ever found in prehistoric Iberia. It took tremendous skill to create something like this. The dagger, believed to be about 5,000 years old, was found among a collection of 10 arrowheads, 4 blades, and a core for making weapons, all made of rock crystal. The items most likely belonged to a very wealthy person who could afford to make or acquire them. Researchers also suggest that the rock crystal may have had a symbolic meaning at that time. Perhaps ancient people used it for vitality, magic rituals, and connections with ancestors. By the way, these excavated artifacts weren't the only thing the scientists discovered. The dagger was found along with the remains of 25 people, including several women and 1 man who are believed to have died due to poisoning. Is there any connection between the cause of death and the crystal? Who knows? Not so long ago, scientists discovered that the warriors of New Guinea honored the memory of their dead fathers in a rather peculiar way. They harvested their thigh bones and used them to make daggers.
Perfectly balanced, this whole thing should be.
Such weapons acted both as adornments and deadly tools when it came to attacking the enemies. Researchers have found out that daggers made of human bones are stronger than those made of animal bones, and for the warriors, they were a symbol of prestige and respect for their ancestors. Such weapons were always worn conspicuously so that everyone knew the exact origin of the bone. Can you imagine what the discoveries of future archaeologists will be like? Some of them will obviously have a lot of questions to us as their ancestors. Take the sarcophagus made by a TikTok user. It weighs 3,000 pounds and is made of reinforced concrete. There's also a headstone with laser-inscribed ingredients for Flamin' Hot Cheetos. The Cheetos packet itself was cast in resin and then suspended inside the sarcophagus on metal wires to keep it safe in case of an earthquake. Afterwards, the creator of the sarcophagus attempted to burn off all the germs inside with a laser. The inscription above the burial site reads, "Do not open for 10,000 years," as well as the year the sarcophagus was created. The reason why the TikTok user did that isn't that important, but imagine the surprise of the archaeologists who'll discover this. Even translating the inscription will be quite difficult because languages are constantly changing. So maybe we shouldn't take all archaeological finds very seriously. Some of them might just be an ancient packet of chips, though some may be like this necklace. This unusual jewelry was found near Northampton, and archaeologists call it a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The necklace consists of at least 30 pendants and beads, Roman coins, gold, glass, and semi-precious stones. The centerpiece is a rectangular pendant with a cross motif, and it's the largest and most intricate element of the necklace. The 1,300-year-old object was found in a burial, presumably of a woman of high status, likely a royalty. 2 decorated pots and a shallow copper dish were also found in the burial. It's believed that the necklace is one of the richest of its kind. That is, among the ancient jewelry already discovered. And yes, such a find could bring archaeologists millions. But alas, scientists don't sell the artifacts they found, but only study them. Sometimes, though, archaeologists don't mind keeping the stuff they found. The story of Howard Carter and the famous Tutankhamun's tomb has been a topic of discussion for decades. It was rumored that an archaeologist had stolen some of its treasures. Despite the lack of solid evidence at the time, we know today Carter clearly didn't mind stealing from the dead pharaoh. Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered in 1922 by Carter and his team, who were the first to enter it. The enormous tomb was full of treasures, with gilded beds, miniature golden statues, and intricate amulets designed to guard the dead in their final resting place. It's believed that while inside, Carter stole at least one such amulet, an item he later gave to the hieroglyphic translator Sir Alan Gardner. After Carter's death in 1939, 18 items taken from the tomb were found in his collection. Fearing damage to relations between England and Egypt, they discreetly sold the objects to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Today, all the items have been returned to Egypt. Speaking of prominent discoveries, it's worth mentioning the Denisova Cave. Over the past decade, some of the most amazing fossils ever found have been discovered here. Someone without knowledge of archaeology and paleontology and lacking specialized tools would likely not find them fascinating. Yet the fossils contain DNA tens of thousands of years old. This genetic material shows that the Denisovans were a separate branch of human evolution, a lost lineage. At some point, the Denisovans disappeared, but not before interbreeding with modern humans. Today, people in places like East Asia and New Guinea still carry fragments of Denisovan DNA. Ancient people may have lived in this cave for as long as 300,000 years. A 32,000-year-old prehistoric species of horse has also been found in the cave. A bone needle made 50,000 years ago was found at the site of archaeological excavations in 2016. It's been described as the oldest known needle. In the same cave, they found a bunch of other animal remains, both extinct and alive today. A cave lion carved from a mammoth tusk was also found there. Yes, it's a lion. Yeah, it's seen better days. But the lion statue, as unsightly as it is, still got lucky. Unlike the owners of the hands found in the ancient Egyptian cache, the discovery of 12 severed hands in 2011 shed light on a practice known as Gold of Honor. This was a ritual performed by Egyptian warriors to gain the approval of the pharaoh, who rewarded them with gold necklaces or gold pendants in the shape of flies. And no, the hands originally belonged not to the warriors themselves, but to their dead enemies. They acted as a kind of trophies. The hands were carefully severed, all the bones below the wrist removed so that only the hand and fingers remained. Apparently, the pharaoh refused to accept anything else. Moreover, archaeologists found no cut marks on the bones, which means that the severing required almost surgical precision, and of course the right tools. Actually, ancient Egypt knew a thing or two about medicine and amputations, although the first surgery of this kind in history goes back to the island of Borneo. About 31,000 years ago, in the tropical forests of the island, a certain stone tool met a bone and a limb was severed, but its owner survived. This is considered evidence of the earliest known surgical amputation, tens of thousands of years before modern surgical tools, antibiotics, or anesthetics were invented. First, an intact human skeleton was discovered, carefully buried in a cave. The human, whose sex could not be determined from the bones, was about 20 years old at the time of his death. When the skeleton was fully excavated, the researchers noticed that it was missing the bottom of its left leg. However, the bones were fused at the bottom, a clear sign of healing after a traumatic injury. The leg was severed cleanly in a straight line with no sign of crushing or shattering, which usually happens if a rock had fallen on it or an animal had bitten it off. The reason for the amputation is unknown to scientists, but I think it must be quite serious. It's unlikely that 31,000 years ago anyone would have easily agreed to lose a leg without a good reason. Actually, this could easily kill a person. But the patient lived at least 6 years after the surgery. That's how long it takes for the bones to heal. That was an eternity back then. Although it's unlikely that ancient people thought of a concept of eternal life, though people in China certainly did. In October 2018, archaeologists there discovered a 2,000-year-old bronze pot containing a yellow liquid that was once thought to be the elixir of immortality. However, the mixture was found in the grave of a dead man, so it's probably not very effective after all. At first, they assumed the liquid was an alcoholic beverage because it smelled like wine. However, further analysis revealed that 1 gallon of the liquid contained potassium nitrate and alunite, the elements mentioned in several ancient Taoist texts as the ingredients to create the mythical elixir of eternal life. Naturally, this mixture has no miraculous properties, especially after standing 2,000 years in a dusty tomb. What do you think of when you hear the phrase dog catacombs? What if we're talking about ancient Egypt? In 2015, a team of archaeologists discovered catacombs containing 8 million dog mummies. They were probably intended as offerings for the Egyptian jackal-headed deity Anubis. People sought his blessing or simply expressed their gratitude for something. I admit it all sounds creepy, but experts compare mummies to the candles that modern people put in churches. Such a huge number of mummies just means that there were a lot of religious people in Egypt at that time. Actually, if you're interested in ancient Egypt, or at least watch some of our history videos, you probably know at that time people liked to mummify everything. It was a perfectly normal thing to do. But what no one, not even archaeologists, expected was to find the remains of a porpoise in a medieval tomb on a tiny island in the English Channel. It was supposedly a tomb of one of the monks. The piece of land where it was found was once a secluded retreat. But what does it have to do with a porpoise? Archaeologists have never seen anything like this. In the 14th century, which is when the tomb was built, people ate porpoises, not buried them, especially on a tiny island with so little space. However, scientists have 3 theories. The first one says that the monks were not supposed to eat the porpoises and simply buried the incriminating evidence. The second theory says the porpoise was cooked in a special way. They packed it with salt and buried it, and then just forgot to dig it up. Well, anything can happen, right? And finally, the third theory claims the porpoise may have had some kind of religious significance for the monks. Unfortunately, we have no way of finding out what exactly happened back then. See you later.